The beautiful game we all know and love is not immune to the harsh realities of the modern world. Despite the passion and loyalty of millions of fans around the globe, the future of some football clubs hangs in a balance. In this video, we'll uncover 10 clubs that due to financial or sporting difficulties could disappear very soon. Number 10. Leicester City. Leicester City provided us with one of the most beautiful Cinderella stories in the history of football. After narrowly avoiding relegation in 2015, Leicester City went on to win the league in 2016 and had a successful Champions League campaign in 2017, reaching the quarter-finals. This run of form made the future look promising for the team, and for a while, it even looked like the Foxes could turn the Big Six into the Big Seven after they won the FA Cup and only barely missed out on Champions League qualification in 2 seasons. Sadly, the club was already struggling internally by then, and the downfall we're now witnessing was inevitable. The pandemic forced the clubs to play without fans, which was a massive loss, since 10% of Leicester City's income came from ticket sales. On the other hand, King Power, the parent company from the club's ownership, was severely impacted by the lack of tourism during the pandemic, which made the owner of Leicester see his fortune go from $5.9 billion to $1.7 billion. That adding up to the big investments made in a new stadium and training complex, plus all the players that were brought in that have devalued by now, puts the club in massive trouble, especially if they are relegated this season. Number 9. Valencia. This is definitely not the first time Valencia are in trouble, as in 2008 the club were reportedly 400 million euros in debt. They were bailed out by Peter Lim in 2014 and were promised to go back to where their club were in the early 2000s. Despite some positive seasons where Valencia managed to finish 4th and win the Copa del Rey, things are now even worse than what they were when Lim took over the club. Valencia sold their biggest stars, forced some household names out of the club, and are now banking all their hopes in Gaia and a beaten up Cavani. The club is massively in debt, and the new Mestalla project is pretty much abandoned for now, and while all of this is happening, the daughter of the owner is flexing her daddy's gifts on Instagram and mocking Valencia fans. It is shameful, and relegation this season could finish Valencia for good. It has happened before, and I'm afraid it will happen again. Number 8. Barcelona. I know, Barca is too big of a club to die. Besides, they're first and they'll probably win La Liga this year. Unfortunately, the financial struggles didn't disappear overnight. They banked hard on the last summer transfer market, but if they don't turn their investments into profit, they'll be in even more trouble. Furthermore, they're now being accused of corruption due to payments of 8.4 million euros to a former vice president of Spain's referees committee. If they're found guilty, they will go down to the second tier of Spanish football. Some players will leave the club on a free transfer or for very little money, and with all the debt that they already have, things could go very ugly very rapidly. Number 7. Schalke 04. Schalke during the last 2 decades were a club that would often go to the Champions League, even advancing all the way to the semis in 2011. They had a very good sporting strategy, producing lots of young players in their academy and then selling for a big profit. However, that all stopped after 2016, when the club changed their philosophy and started paying big bucks for players like Embolo for 26.5 million, Bentaleb for 19 million, and many more, while letting players like Goretzka and Choupo-Moting leave for free. Those big investments didn't translate into better results, and in 2020, all of their problems came knocking on their door at the same time. No Champions League money, losing 2.3 million euros for every home game without fans, no profits from transfers, and 1 year later, they even lost their biggest sponsor, Gazprom. Relegation came next, and even though they were promoted this year, they're still struggling, sitting in the relegation area in the Bundesliga. Could this relegation be the final nail in Schalke's coffin? Number 6. Etienne. Many of you might not know this, but Etienne still holds a number 1 place in terms of Ligue 1 titles alongside PSG. However, Les Verts are seriously struggling right now. After being relegated last season and having their stadium invaded by their own supporters, it seemed like that was the bottom of the pit for the French outfit. Sadly, things got even worse as they spent a great part of this season in the relegation spots with little to no investment in quality players. They have since improved and currently sit in the mid-table of Ligue 2, but if they can find a buyer, I can only see the club getting even worse. Number 5. Everton. When billionaire Farhad Moshiri arrived in February 2016, Everton fans were hopeful that a new era of prosperity and success was on the horizon. But instead of reaching new heights, the club has been on a downward spiral for years, facing instability and decline. They did spend a lot of money on players, but very few of them actually improved the team. On the other hand, managers aren't given enough time to implement their strategies. All of that leads to instability, and despite some promises by the board to analyze what was harming the club and a guarantee that the relegation battle was just a one-time thing, this year they're even worse. With a lot of money invested into a new stadium adding up to the club's debt, only time will tell if Everton can survive a relegation. Number 4. Wigan Athletic. If you're young, you might not know this, but Wigan used to be Premier League regulars. After they were relegated though, their financial problems grew out of control and they have been punished with points deduction more than once due to unpaid salaries. Wigan were put into administration and then sold to a new owner, after which they managed to climb back to the Championship, but this year they're going down again. They were late in paying wages last June, July and October and have recently been docked points once again. Let's hope Wigan manage to turn things around, but looking at their current state, it's very unlikely. Number 3. FC Basel. Once a club who did really well in European competitions and that dominated the Swiss Super League, now a utter shadow of themselves. Since they were bought by Bernhard Buggener in 2017, the club entered a massive downward spiral. They've lost the supremacy of Swiss football to young boys, have won their last trophy in 2019, and they now sit 6th in the league. Many fans have distanced themselves from the club, even going to the lengths of burying their shirts as a signal that the Basel they once loved is no longer there. Number 2. Venezia. It was only last season when everybody was wearing a Venezia kit due to how beautiful they were, but few people were actually aware of what was going on behind the scenes. The club managed to have an incredible rise back to Serie A 20 years after being relegated thanks to the investment of their American owners. But when they finally arrived on top, the club decided to brand themselves more like a fashion club and not so much like an Italian football team. They chose the color black to the home kit, which has nothing to do with the city, released several established players from the team and brought in many talents from South America and the MLS that the coach didn't request at all. And surprisingly, that did not end well and they were relegated back to Serie B. This year, Venezia is fighting to stay in the second division of Italian football with minimal support from the fans that were pushed away by their own club. And number 1, PSG. This one is highly controversial and you might not agree with me, but I don't think PSG will achieve more than what they have already. They spent a ridiculous amount of money on Messi, Neymar and Mbappe only to sell their shirts because the most elusive price for them still slipped away time and time again. Now the 3 of them will most likely leave the club for very little compared to what PSG spent to get them. It's up to the Parisians to find a way to build a cohesive footballing unit, because if they just keep buying 1 or 2 superstars to carry an entire team to a Champions League win, they are doomed to fail and lose power. Plus, when you have an owner accused of kidnapping and torture, the future can't be that bright for your club. And that is it. I know this video is controversial, but if you don't agree with some of these selections, leave your opinion in the comments and let's have a discussion. Thank you for reaching the end of the video. If you like content like this, subscribe so you don't miss a single update from Thorn FC. And since you've liked this video, watch this one up next. I bet you'll enjoy it. I'll see you there.